See, a couple people are just still joining us, so we'll wait a couple minutes or a minute or two just before we get going here. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Well, good afternoon. I'm Becky Busselman. I work at GLOW in the advancement department. And if you're unfamiliar with advancement, we do all things fundraising, kind of help with parent engagement and build some community. So one of the things that we're working on is our big gala coming up this spring. So save the date for Saturday, April 23rd. And we have about 17 parents helping us out so far in the committee, but we're always looking for more. So if you're still interested in joining, feel free to reach out. But getting to the reason why you're here today is to talk to our head of school, Kim Peoples, and Ellen Engstrom, our director of curriculum. And they wanted to share with you some things that are going on at school and the work that they have been doing and want to present. So this is also being recorded, and we'll share this out with the entire parent population as well. But Kim and Ellen will do the presentation and provide an opportunity to ask questions. So feel free to do that along the way or save them for the end, whatever your preference is. Take it away, Kim.
All right. Well, good afternoon. I'm hearing an echo of feedback, so forgive me if I pause for a little bit. So far we have two wonderful people that have joined us, Joyce and Beth. So Joyce and Beth, hello. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to share my screen. You know, we can't get away with not doing slides. So I'm going to have a few slides that we're going to share with you, and hopefully we'll have some wonderful opportunity for conversation as well. So let's see, I've got a lot of slides going on, or screens going on here. So I want to make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. Okay. Okay, do you see a slide that says self-advocacy? Perfect. Oops. Okay. So Ellen and I are going to go back and forth in our talk, just have a few slides just to guide our discussion with you. We're going to talk about some of the mainstays in our curriculum, as well as talk about the future of our curriculum. And before we get into some of the details of that, we want to talk about really two important skills that we want all of our students to walk away with, in all of the skills and strategies that we want to develop in our students, that are lifelong skills and strategies that will serve them well when they transition at whatever point from Groves Academy, whether it's in middle school or high school, and it will certainly serve them well into adulthood. One of those skills being self-advocacy, the ability to articulate one's needs and making informed decisions about the support that's necessary to meet their needs now and in the future. And the other important life skill that we want our students to walk away with is agency. And it's the personal empowerment, which is giving people the capacity and opportunity to imagine a future of their own design. You hear our teachers talking all the time about our students walking away with having the ability to advocate for themselves, the needs that they have in terms of accommodations, in terms of having questions answered, in terms of the supports that they need to really get at lessons, to really get at understanding material, to really hone in on the help that they need to understand the lessons, to understand the skills that we're imparting to them through the curriculum that we're teaching. And ultimately, where agency comes into play, we're using all of those skills, we're using that self-advocacy for our students then to be able to translate that into a future of their own creation. And it's said so well in this quote that I'd love to share with you. Personalized learning is not what is done to the learner or about tailoring the learning. It's about helping each learner to identify and develop skills they need to support and enhance their own learning so that agency and self-advocacy is realized. So what's important to us is that we're creating lifelong learners. And we know that our students are coming to us with various learning challenges, various learning disabilities, and we're helping our students to develop those skills and strategies to be lifelong learners. And we're not here to be the fixers. We're not here to be, all of a sudden your students are going to walk away with, the certain fix. And now they're leaving us and they're whole. All is well. We know unfortunately in life that's rarely the case, but they will walk away with a sense of confidence, purpose, and success because we're about creating those transformative learning experiences that will lead to the agency and the self-advocacy that will stay with them in lifelong experiences. And so we're doing that through the curriculum that is well-researched, that is evidence-based, and that is the sole basis of what makes a Groves Academy learning experience a well-deserved experience for our students. And so Ellen is going to take the first part of our talk with you and talk about what is a Groves, or how does Groves curriculum in its current form support the development of self-advocacy and agency in our students. So Ellen, please take it away for us.
Okay. Yeah, our curriculum, what's I think special about our curriculum is, in addition to the fact that that we care a great deal about having our curriculum be based on research, to be based on science, because it's important that we don't just have an idea of what a philosophy might be and therefore we'll try it out. Our students need very well-trained teachers and who are very knowledgeable in the kind of learning challenges that they have, and also how to support students, remediate students, accommodate students when necessary. And so our curriculum is, while we certainly pride ourselves on our support for students with dyslexia through a scientifically based reading instruction curriculum, we also are presenting it to students in the context of a supportive environment so that students who have executive function challenges or anxiety about that's left over from from some of their difficulties learning to read and spell and so on, are dealt with at the same time that we're instructing them in how to read and spell and write. So in terms of the reading curriculum, our core curriculum is really the Wilson reading system, which is designed specifically for students with dyslexia. It's a very it's a very well-researched and with good outcomes curriculum. And we have teachers who are trained and in most cases certified in teaching that curriculum. We also use another one, Spell Links to Reading and Writing, which is another one that we use for students who have some additional needs for support in language learning as well as reading and spelling. And our, so we want to be able to remediate students as much as possible, but we also know that that dyslexia is not something that we can fix. There are, even in students who are well remediated, there are markers that stay with somebody who has dyslexia, oftentimes making them slower. They're reading slower and writing slower than it might be, in which case we want to be sure that we provide them with tools to help them manage those challenges as they move forward in school. We also want them to understand exactly what the nature of their challenge is, and what dyslexia is, how it has nothing to do with it being their fault, that it's part of who they are. And so that in that sort of self-knowledge and experience of learning, but also developing a sort of metacognitive awareness of how reading and writing works for them, that they begin to develop the ability to explain that to other people and to understand what they need to be successful in different environments. And keeping in mind that dyslexia is not related to intelligence at all, and there are wildly creative and knowledgeable people who also happen to be dyslexic, and knowing that that is just that is okay. We also want to build, through our curriculum, we want to build self-knowledge and self-knowledge in students about how to, what we call, do school, so that they are comfortable and have tools for learning and studying content areas and math and other any area that they pursue, by teaching them how to read a textbook, how to study for tests, how to take notes, what they need to be able to do, what kind of tools they might need to carry those functions out successfully. And through that, they gain the knowledge of what kind of support they need should they go on to college or another school that might be academically quite demanding. They have a good idea of what it's going to take for them to be successful in that environment, so that they can reach out and ask for the supports that they need. I want to say too that a number of our students, in addition to having challenges with language in terms of language learning, reading, writing, spelling, etc., that running through, and in many cases, our students are issues with executive function, which are those cognitive skills that enable certain kinds of memory, to be able to also enable planning and organization and emotional control and so on. And so that we want to be able to support students support students' executive functions, so that they learn to recognize when they need some kind of support for planning a project or developing, developing another project or opportunity or something, so on. So we want to educate students about executive function, and we do this in all three divisions in various ways appropriate to the age and stage of the students, but also to make them aware of their own needs and where they may have executive function challenges, and what they might do to find support, and hence be able to achieve success with their goals and so on. So our curriculum is very much, so we have lots of content area classes. We have writing and literature classes, science, math, And through all of it is this awareness of what it takes to be a student, how to be a student, and how students can become best aware of what they need to be successful so that they can ask for it. So from the youngest student through the all the way through upper school at varying levels, we help students to gain the skills that they need, basic skills that they need in reading and writing and math and so on, so that they can improve their academic success, but at the same time help them to understand their learning process, their challenges, their successes, and so on, which really build that ability to and confidence to be a good self-advocate, and to and to be able to ask for what they need. Yes. Now, is there anything else that you want to know about our current curriculum?
And, Ellen, I would just add on to that, just to, just thinking, it's one thing to see that as a parent, just putting on the parent hat. I was a grows parent for a number of years along with my husband. So I saw that, and experienced that with my son. And then certainly seeing that as a head of school and having the opportunity to be in the classroom and watch teachers teach and have that experience and watch, being a part of the evaluative process. And that's another lens through which to view the curriculum. And for the past few weeks, I've been back in the classroom teaching 2 classes. I'm teaching in the upper school and teaching English language arts to 9th and 10th graders. And we're working on Romeo and Juliet right now. We're in Act 4. And I'm also teaching an executive function course for 11th graders. And we're looking at leadership. And so wearing these 3 hats and looking at, the curriculum through these 3 lenses, it is amazing to compare my experiences with curriculum in the traditional sense of a classroom experience in a traditional school, and looking at how we focus on curriculum at Groves and at GLOW, and the marriage of metacognition, the marriage of learning how to learn. And we're using curriculum as a catalyst for that, as opposed to curriculum for curriculum's sake. For example, with my executive function course, we're studying expressions of leadership or leadership style now. And I'm having my students work in teams. So they're not collaborative groups, they're in teams, right? Kind of mimicking the world of work. So they're in teams now, and their job will be to do deep research on different expressions of leadership. And they're going to think about the EF skills, the EF competencies that different leadership styles will need to be effective. They're going to think about the different components of what effective leaders are able to do, and those expressions of leadership and that connection with executive functioning. So just how you can marry, the curricular work with real life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just it's wonderful to see the students make those connections. And our students are such deep thinkers, and they're such expressive thinkers. And the deliberateness with which they think about material is amazing. So I just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, and I would add too, at the other end of the age spectrum, in just in lower school, where teachers are teaching students just to beginning writers to understand what a sentence is and how to express themselves in writing in a complete sentence, and then structure a paragraph, which is really a very complicated and cognitive task, requiring a lot of planning, requiring a lot of organizing of thought, according, as well as skill in writing and spelling and so on, grammar, etc. And the process that we use through our writing curriculum, the Writing Revolution, supports that that process beautifully by breaking it down, helping students to understand what a complete sentence is, and not so much just learning grammar rules, but recognizing that sentences have to say who or what does something, and we kind of build gradually from there so that students first recognize the difference between a sentence and a fragment, moving on to adding, recognizing the different kinds of sentences, moving on to adding clauses using conjunctions, making a longer sentence, moving to paragraphs where we're working on what is the topic and how are we, in different stages, so that students aren't just sort of told, all right, write a paragraph about this. Well, that actually, teachers do that all the time, but it is really difficult. That's a real skill and process that involves language, marriage of language and executive function, that students need to know how to handle in order to become good communicators in writing. Same way in speaking too.
So there's a deep sense, and there's an emphasis on the why as much as there's an emphasis on the how and the what. Any questions for us so far? Or comments? All right. Ellen, should we move on?
I think so.
Okay. All right, so this is the foundation of what makes a Grove experience, our current curriculum, which is a solid foundation for the experiences that our students, certainly build upon in our lower school, middle school, and upper school. And certainly with any school, we always want to think about what we do well. And, as our a common phrase, if it's not broken, let's not fix it. But certainly we always want to find ways that we can evolve and to always find ways where we can stay current. And so we use this question to help us to do that. What is guiding our examination of curriculum into the future? So certainly our curriculum in its current state is solid. We're constantly looking for material that is relevant. And as Ellen has said, is research-based, is scientifically sound. It's going to produce the outcomes that are best for our learners and for our students. But we also want to make sure that we're staying current, that we're staying abreast of what's going to prepare our students for the challenges and changes in the world as it will exist in their future. And so we are looking at our curriculum through multiple lenses. And so these lenses that we're examining our curriculum through are 5 pillars. 5 pillars that served us well during the initial phases of COVID and will continue to serve us well as we examine where we want to go in our future. Actually, they started off with 4, and one pillar that we added, literacy, is a pillar that's been there all along and has been our foundation. So my talk with you just for the next few minutes is to really share with you some things that we're doing in this current school year and beyond to really build on the wonderful things that we're already doing within our curriculum and how we're getting the entire school community and GLOW community involved in this process as well. So our 5 curriculum pillars are literacy, executive functioning, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, social emotional learning and well-being, digital literacy, and technology. And so Ellen and I embarked on an experience this summer where we had an opportunity to work with a very well-respected and well-renowned researcher and educator to help us to think about what are ways that we can build on the wonderful foundation that's already laid in our curricular approach to, again, think about our future and ways that we can strengthen and evolve what we're already doing. And so from that experience this summer, we formed a group that is not only comprised of wonderful Groves Academy teachers, but individuals across the Groves Learning Organization, members of our literacy, our Groves literacy partners, as well as the Learning Center.
Mhm.
And we have members from the different parts of our organization who are helping us to examine very important questions in these 5 pillars of our curriculum. And we've had opportunities to meet twice so far in this school year. And just in this past week, we've had quite a few hours to be together and to talk deeply about these 5 different curriculum areas. And when I said we've had some time to meet, we had over 3 hours to meet together. And for educators, that's a luxury. Usually
Yes.
we're meeting together for maybe 30 minutes, 45
At the end
minutes.
of the day, when
At
everyone's
the end of the
tired.
day, exactly. So we were able to make arrangements to meet for a number of hours together to engage in deep conversation and to do research and to do wonderful thinking and planning together. And so what I'd love to do is to just share a few highlights of some of their thinking. I'm going to save the literacy group for last because Ellen was a part of that group. So I'd love for Ellen to share some of their thinking and work. And then we're actually going to close out our discussion. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I would love for those of you who've joined us today to ask us any questions that you'd have. And then close out our discussion from there. So I'm going to start with just sharing some notes and some feedback from the social emotional learning and well-being group. And just from their opportunity to meet together, some of the things that they want to examine in their work together this year. They want to focus on the 5 core competencies for social emotional learning and want to do some deep exploration in looking at self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship skills. And they want to help each division, lower, middle, and upper school, to develop a common language that each of the schools are able to understand together and to develop a common set of values that are well understood across each division. And it's also important to know that in each of these 5 curriculum areas, each curriculum area has developed a Groves-facing as well as a student-facing goal. The Groves-facing goal is for the educator. So it's to help us to make sure that in our planning, in our consideration of units and lessons and any curriculum material, that we're making sure that it's to meet certain objectives and goals for our students. And then in the student-facing goals, these are the demonstrations of understanding and knowledge that we want our students to be able to demonstrate at whatever point they're transitioning from Groves. And so each of the curriculum areas have developed both Groves-facing and student-facing goals. And so for the, let's see, the next group I'd like to share with you for the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging group, one of the outgrowths of their conversation is an interest in promoting deeper empathy and understanding of the ways in which we are diverse, the importance of inclusivity, the importance of equity and belonging as a community, and the importance of critical thinking, and the encouragement of critical conversations and real conversations and connected conversations. And how can we encourage that among our students and community? For the digital literacy and technology group, important things that they'd like to consider in their work this year: how to strategize their approach in two parts: digital literacy, and also thinking about hardware, software, infrastructure, and determining what specifically is the balance in understanding digital literacy, thinking about health, thinking about knowledge, problem solving, STEM and assistive technology. How do we show up as digital citizens? Not only understanding the technical aspects of technology, but what are our responsibilities as digital citizens? And for executive functioning, how can we develop, similar to the social emotional group, how can we develop that common practice and that common vocabulary and language that runs across divisions? So really developing that interconnectedness and understanding so that as you transition from one division to the next, you're building on the skills. And there are some, there's definitely evidence of that that's happening right now, but how can we do that in a more systemized way and very easily translatable for students to clearly understand as they go from one division to the next? Ellen, what would you share from the literacy group?
Yeah, well, the literacy group had, as part of its action step, was to look at the research, the current descriptions of literacy for the 21st century, and then propose a working definition for GLOW that would be the basis of our thinking, kind of moving forward for development of all parts of our curriculum. And literacy is a tricky term, as you may be guessing, because it shows up in all kinds of ways, digital literacy and social emotional literacy, so on. And so what we talked about was how important literacy is for fulfilling one's potential as an individual, getting further education, higher education, and so on. But it's also an agent of empowerment that that people who are literate, and in this case, we're basically referring to language-based activities or actions, is empowering as a communication tool. To be literate is to be able to communicate well and effectively to an audience. So literacy isn't just about being a literate person as somebody who's there in an ivory tower by themselves, appreciating whatever, but the literacy really allows people to achieve potential and then participate in a community of some sort. So by being literacy allows somebody to communicate information, but also compute, interpret, analyze knowledge from various sources, reliable sources that involve reading and writing and speaking and listening skills. And then, at a basic level, just understanding how words work, either spoken or written, so on. And we looked at all kinds of definitions of literacy, some of which are, you know, seem pretty far flung. But we also realized that literacy, that goal of fulfilling potential and being able to fully participate in a community through communication, interpretation, analysis, using speaking, writing, listening skills, and reading skills to be able to gain the resources to communicate effectively and authentically, for whatever purpose. And that's kind of all of the definitions that we ultimately developed all basically have elements of those, that the purpose of literacy goes beyond just being able to read and write and speak, but that the purpose is for participation in a community, in a society, of others, and using those skills for that purpose to achieve goals, etc.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's amazing. 3 hours, and we researched, we talked about it, we you know, talked about media literacy and digital literacy, and we felt that it's important to sort of harness our ideas around language, our language, and what language allows us to do. Written language, spoken language, ability to listen to language, and so on. And that's was sort of the, which in one way seems, I have a little sheet of paper with me with all the different with various definitions that we kind of finally came to after looking at all these various global definitions and so on. And it seems like, wow, 3 hours, and we, came to this, but when we came to it, it was in a very, kind of in a deep and very, with a deep and very authentic understanding, I think, of what we want to, how we want to explain and teach literacy here at GLOW.
And what's exciting about this process is that we're looking at it as a process. We're not starting with, we're interested in developing a product, and so we're going to do whatever we can and whatever rush job we need to do to develop the product. We're looking at the process and we're enjoying the journey of the process. And we're letting it happen organically and naturally. And we're in such a great position because we're solidly positioned. We're not in a rush to remediate a wrong or to correct something that is in dire straits. We're in a position to really be thoughtful and to be innovative. And we're using it as an opportunity to be thoughtful and to be creative and to really enjoy the process of learning that we talk about with our students so very much. We're enjoying that process as well. And it's about coming up with recommendations and then developing action items from those recommendations and creating the space to do that. And along the way, we're sharing that process with our faculty, and we will definitely share that process with our larger community, with our families and our parents as well. And where we can bring families and parents into the process, get feedback and bring you along the journey, we definitely want to do that as well. And so this is the point where I'm going to stop sharing. Mm-hmm. And we'll ask if there are any questions or any comments or anything you'd like to share. I love seeing all of your beautiful names and would also love to see your beautiful faces. I tell that to my students all the time when we're on Zoom. Your names are wonderful, but your faces are great too.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh,
yes.
How do you incorporate these non-academic subjects like diversity, equality, inclusivity, and belonging into an academic environment? You mentioned empathy. How do you teach empathy? We should be getting this, kids should be getting it from their families, but if they don't get it, how do you teach that?
I think one of the greatest ways to teach empathy is through literature. In fact, there are even, believe it or not, there are studies on this, that when people, but children in this case, are reading about in a novel or a story or being read a story about characters that are in situations and it plays out in the action, in the theme, in the story. I think that is an incredible opportunity for students to see it and imagine it and see how it plays out and talk about it. And I mean, I often say when, in terms of when kids are just developing the skills for reading, that the simple act of holding a child in your lap and reading is a wonderful and wonderful giving kind of warm, loving activity. And when you read a book, even as simple a book as, say, like Frog and Toad or Friends, Frog and Toad, run into issues with each other, and sometimes they get on each other's nerves. And you see how each one of them has to adjust to their partner, and that's at a very simple level. But that's really where it begins. Then you move on to stories in the as children get older, and then into high school in terms of novels and so on. And you see, and as much as I say, we need to teach informational articles and kids, but still one of those. So that kind of sophisticated understanding of empathy, I think is really helped by exposure to stories and about humans doing human things and learning how to deal with it. And then, of course, on top of that, we want to show empathy, we want to model it, and in a supportive environment where students feel safe, so that to show empathy will not risk exposure or ridicule or anything like that. And Kim, I'm sure you have even,
Well, I was going to say, and interestingly enough, in the executive functioning course, and we're studying leadership, we're just finishing a unit on emotional intelligence, and we're looking at Daniel Goleman's 5 areas of emotional intelligence, and one of them being empathy. So it's self-awareness, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And so we're actually reading one of his articles that appeared in the Harvard Business Review, and he does a section on empathy. So we're looking at it through an informational text.
Yes.
And he's specifically talking about empathy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I just think, I think that sort of thing is important. And, depending on the age of the child, but
yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting when you think about the way that we differentiate. So we may be reading an informational text that's in the Harvard Business Review, and this text is 19 pages long, and it's something else. But we're reading it section by section. We're reading it together. We're taking notes. It's also available in a PDF so that if students would like to have it read to them, they have the ability to have the text highlighted and read to them. We're then reading it in class and going over the sections. So there's a way to differentiate, to modify, and to accommodate. So they're still getting the complexity of the text but we're also learning how to modify and accommodate the information so that they're still exposed to the ideas, but they're learning the idea that, hey, maybe I have to access it a different way, but I can still get to the ideas.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mhm. Other questions or comments?
Well, I do if no one else has any.
Good, good.
What do the kids do in their class called executive function?
Good question.
That's a very good question. Well, I can speak to the point from my perspective in teaching it. So right now, for example, today, we start with a mindfulness moment, for example. And the mindfulness moment for today is boosting your EQ. And we were boosting our EQ through music. And so the music we listened to today was Christopher Cross's Sailing. And I connected the song to a memory I had of my grandmother and an aerobics class that we took in the 1980s, where that was the cool down song. And I still listen to the song as a way to center myself, to remember my grandmother, and to just, release all kinds of worries. And so I took my students back to the 1980s. I went through the cool down scenario that I remember from this class with my grandmother. And we started the day in this cool down moment. And it was fun, and I got them to laugh. And then from there, we, talked about, gave them an executive functioning refresher where we talked about the different skills. And then we went right into our different types of leadership. So usually what will happen in an executive functioning class, you'll go through at least 3 transitions. You'll start with a mindfulness moment. You'll go with a centering on an executive functioning skill, and then you'll get into your specific topic as it relates to your theme. So in the upper school, 9th grade really focuses on what are the different types of executive functioning, really focusing on those skills, introducing it.
What they are, how
what
you
they
apply
are,
them.
exactly.
Yeah, right.
In your 10th grade year, it's all about understanding the brain.
Mhm.
In your 11th grade year, it's leadership. And in your 12th grade year, it's legacy. So you're getting ready to leave Groves Academy. What legacy will you leave? Then how do you start your new journey? What agency will you then begin to develop? And so it's about the different transitions, that happen in the classrooms. You try not to stick with one,
Yeah.
thing that you're doing in the class. You try to have at least 3 transitions that you're walking the students through. And that's typically what you do in any class. You walk them through 3
Right.
transitions.
But what we noticed after we started, even just the first year with the 9th grade year, the students were coming home and talking about it, which, if you know 9th grade students, they're not big talkers at home necessarily, and began to reflect on their own executive function and so on, which we had never seen before. And it struck us, and students were really enjoying the class and were talking about it. And, it was quite a remarkable change from maybe the way they deal with other academic subjects. And we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just, sitting around going, oh, because because we wanted there to be an academic side to it, where there was reading and research and application of the concept to other settings, and so on. So.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I have another one if no one else is going to ask.
That's great.
Would we know if our Groves Academy attendee has been diagnosed with executive function disorder?
This course is not designed to, this course is not designed to be a diagnostic.
Oh, I understand that, but
Uh-huh.
someone earlier said a lot of kids have executive
Oh,
function disorder. So would we know if our child had that?
maybe, maybe not. I mean, it depends. It's certainly students who are diagnosed with attention deficit disorder have typically have issues with executive function. We all have issues with executive function. And so, you know, a lot of the things that we do to support executive function are not just good for our students, they're good for everybody. So we do a lot of work with, you know, about how to get things done, you know, which all of us, I don't know, I have trouble with procrastination sometimes. And not, and I'm highly imperfect, of course, so it's not a surprise, but still, you know, to think about, okay, if you've got this to do, what does it look like? Get a vision of what it's going to be, because a lot of people start things and they don't really, they think, well, I'll do a little of this and I'll do a little of that, and eventually they'll all work out. But then, you know, sometimes it doesn't, and it's just a big mush of stuff. And so we think about, you know, specific goals. When you're done, it will be like this. And then think about, what do you need to do? What do you need to do to get done? So that's when you begin to think of the action steps that are going to happen, that need to happen to get this project or paper or whatever it is done. What do you need to get ready to be doing things? And then finally, what do you need to do to get done? Which means, have you turned it in? You know, what's the final stages of getting done? Because it's okay to be done, but if you haven't turned it in or done that final step, it's sort of like, So those are the kinds of things that we do. And we're learning as we, you know, learn about executive function research. Executive function plays itself out in all kinds of things that you wouldn't expect. We never used to think that executive function had anything to do with learning to read, but it does, especially with reading comprehension, but really even just learning to decode, learning to have some flexibility about what sounds the letters make and so on. So, you know, certain diagnoses like attention deficit disorder have an executive function component to them. I would argue depression, mood disorders, and other things do too. They may not be specified in the diagnostic report, however.
Thanks.
So, sorry to jump in. So I have a question on what you said. You're talking about the like the doing it, showing them how to turn in the assignment or whatever. So my child is a sophomore and has now had 2 years of executive functioning. And to me, because he talks about it, we go through it together, it all seems very theoretical. Like it's like, oh, we talk about mindfulness. We haven't really done something to say, this is what mindfulness is. So are they doing those things in class? And like, I know last year as a freshman, he talked about the beer and the golf balls. But all he ever seemed to remember from that was that, you know, the golf balls have to go in first and the beer goes in last, but he never really did anything to apply it. Are they doing things in class to apply these theoretical concepts?
All the time, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
But it takes time for it to generalize to somewhere outside of, you know, that's the real challenge with teaching, is that you do lots and lots of practice in your classroom, but getting it outside of your classroom into a practical setting outside of school takes more time. You have to, you know, and sometimes students don't always communicate clearly too, which so it can seem kind of theoretical, but, and you know.
Well, because I still help him with his homework quite a bit. And even he and I talk about it, and it's completely theoretical. He still doesn't understand like mindfulness. This year they did all this mindfulness stuff, and he's like, they watched like 6 videos and had to write some worksheets, but he's like, I still don't understand how we use mindfulness or
I see.
what the purpose of that would be in this. Or like last year, they talked about 12 different ways to do time management, but they never said, try to use this time management or pick a time management skill and use that to do your assignment. It was just, here are 12 different ways you can do time management. So I was just wondering if we're also saying, hey, pick Pomodoro, or this is, you know, how you would apply mindfulness, kind of those step things after just talking about it and just saying, here they are we actually helping them apply them? Because I know we've talked about it, but I just am like, is this happening?
Yeah.
'Cause I don't see it, and that's why I'm asking.
Right. And that's the reason why that it's a 4-year course as well. In some instances, it does. The first few years, there might just be an introduction and kind of laying the foundation of here's what it is, and here's some of the terminology, here's the basic understanding, the mechanics. And then as we go along, some of the deeper understanding and application comes, right? So that's definitely a part of it. I know that there are different ways that students are doing mindfulness activities. Some of it is, you know, through the meditation. I know that there's some journaling that the sophomore classes are doing as well. So they're trying to vary the different expressions of mindfulness that students are doing. Some of it is meditative in nature, some of it is active in nature, some of it is journaling, and it's just really trying to find that piece that's going to be kind of that lifelong, or at least a bit easier to put into practice.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, because I've noticed, and I have 3 sophomores all in my carpool, and it comes from all 3 of them, is that
Mhm.
they're not getting the connection
Yeah.
between what they're doing with journaling or what they're doing with
Yeah.
drawing, and how that is mindfulness and what mindfulness does to help
Mhm.
them. So that's what I was just trying to find out
Yeah.
about, was
Mhm.
how,
Yeah.
you know, kind of how are we doing that connection? Because they're like, oh, we're drawing in our journal this month, or we're, you know,
Mhm.
writing in our journal this month. But when you ask them, so what is mindfulness? They still can't
Yeah.
like communicate what it is.
Mhm.
So,
And for
okay.
some, for some students, it's still a little like, okay, that's still a little, it's a little weird.
Yeah,
It,
sure.
I mean, just for a lack of, but that's so unscientific way, an uneducated way to put it, but it's just like, that's weird. You know,
Yeah.
and
Well-
even when I was doing the piece this morning with the music, for some students, it was great. I could physically see them get into it. For other students, like, okay, you know, but you know, it's still, it's exposure, it's happening, you know, it'll, something will click in, and sometimes you have to throw things at them, something will stick.
Oh yeah.
You keep trying, it'll stick.
Right. Exactly. And, you know, time management is time management is incredibly hard. There are all these techniques and I understand them really well, and I know why they exist. Can I use them successfully? Not always.
And speaking of time management, we
It's
see that
time.
it's 2:00.
Yes. Okay.
So Becky, we throw it over to you.
Yes, it's yours.
All right, well, thank you. Thanks, Kim and Ellen, for discussing all the different things we do at school every day. And thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. And in this weird COVID world, it's a nice way to see people's faces and engage with parents. So thank you. And you're always welcome to follow up if you have any more questions after this. Please reach out. We will also be sharing this recording in the parent email that goes out on Sundays, and look for the next Parent Connect to sign up for as well. So
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining us. Bye-bye. Take good
Bye.
care.
Bye.